Hello and welcome to another episode of the UCLA Bruins Insider Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Connor Moreno, lead writer for UCLA Bruins on SI. Today we're going to go ahead and continue our series of ranking UCLA's most important games this season. Last episode, we went ahead and talked about Ohio State, which was number 10. So today we're going to move on to number 9. The last two episodes were about Ohio State and Penn State, obviously two juggernauts in college football. UCLA is definitely not going to be favorited in those matchups, which is why I kind of put them on the higher end of the ranking in terms of importance. They were, however, ranked lower, or I guess higher in this case. They were, however, ranked higher than their two non-conference games against New Mexico and UNLV, solely because, they're conference games and just the upside of, a potential upset in those games really changes the trajectory of UCLA's season. Which moves us now to number 9, and we're getting into the teams that UCLA, it's a conference matchup, and UCLA is going to be favorited or in a toss-up for that game against them. So number 9, we're starting with Maryland. Maryland obviously is a conference game for UCLA. They're going to be favorited against the Terrapins. I think Maryland is one of the lower projected Big Ten teams this season in terms of power rankings. I think they might be 17th. Let me see if I got that right. Yeah, there's the 17th best team in the Big Ten, just ahead of Purdue in terms of football. But this week, what is it? It's week 8, and it comes just in the height of Big Ten play, which is right after Michigan State and right before they play against the 20th ranked Indiana Hoosiers. Now, this Michigan State and Maryland game, they are right after Penn State, but UCLA might be favored in both of them. Not too sure about Michigan State, but definitely against Maryland. It's going to be in the Rose Bowl. So UCLA will definitely be favored in that game. And it's one of those, I've been talking about it. I mean, I do think that UCLA has a good chance at starting 6-1 or even 5-2. 6-1 is more on the, I would say, optimistic side. But if we look at the schedule, Utah, that first game, Utah's going to be favored, but it could be a toss-up. And then you have UNLV, New Mexico, where UCLA will probably be favored in both of those. Then you move on to Northwestern to kick off conference play, and UCLA will be favored in that one. And then you have Penn State, probably a penciled-in loss, and then you have Michigan State, which will be another toss-up, and then Maryland, which I think is a win. So if you look at those, UCLA could either start 6-1 on the optimistic side, and then 5-2 or 4-3 on the more realistic side, which obviously you'd prefer to go 6-1 or 5-2, but 4-3 I think is good, because then you're one win away from tying last season's win total, and then 2 wins away from not only exceeding last season's win total, but also getting into that bowl game territory. But yeah, this Maryland game, I think amidst a really tough conference schedule, is one of those games where you can kind of settle down and go for a win. So that's why I think this game is pretty important, but not more important than many of the other games that we're going to move into. Now, as we've been doing in this series with all of UCLA's opponents, we've been seeing how national analysts are previewing them this season. That's no different with Maryland. So ESPN's Bill Connolly previewed them in a whole Big Ten preview, and so here's what he had to say about Maryland. Can't believe I just yawned again. I've been trying to stop. Anyways, in 2024's The Price, What It Takes to Win a College Football's Era of Chaos, authors Armen Keteyian and John Talty talked to Maryland's Loxley about his school jockeying for position in this new paying the players world. Loxley compared his Terps to Macy's, trying to keep both their higher-end Saks Fifth Avenues of college football from plucking away his best talent, and then discount stores from taking away his young backups. I'm getting eaten from both ends, and that's why you don't see effing Macy's very much anymore, he said. I thought about that quote a lot as Maryland got absolutely wrecked by the portal this offseason, losing starters and key contributors to Arkansas, Auburn, Colorado, Indiana, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Texas, UAB, and Wisconsin, and losing backups to Coastal Carolina, East Carolina, Fresno State, Georgia State, James Madison, Sacramento State, Sam Houston, and UCF. Jeez. Maryland had already suffered a disastrous 2024 season, collapsing to 4-8 and 86th in SP+, then got hit harder by spring attrition than almost any power conference program. The Terps are 107th in returning production and looking at only about 1 in 3 chance of bowling this fall. Loxley had engineered 3 straight winning seasons and 2 top 30 SP plus finishes, but it feels as if he's starting from scratch in year 7. There's almost no choice but to go with a full youth movement in 2025, but it could bear decent fruit. Blue chip freshman Malik Washington could start at quarterback next to sophomore running back and yards after contract machine Nolan Ray, and behind a line that might feature only 1 or 2 seniors. The defense has quite a few exciting sophomores: edge rusher Leo Avery and Trey Reddick, transfer tackles Joel Starlings from North Carolina and Ian Thomas from St. Francis, cornerback Lakeith Rolland, and blue chip freshmen such as Zahir Mathis could quickly play a role. Forced to go young, Loxley could find he has a pretty exciting roster core, but that might not help him much in 2025, and he'll then have to hold on to that roster core in 2026. That certainly proved difficult this past offseason. So you could say that Maryland is going into a rebuild, and they're probably, they're probably going to be one of UCLA's easiest opponents on the schedule, maybe next to New Mexico and maybe UNLV in that non-conference schedule, although UNLV is a pretty big wild card. But UCLA is definitely going to be favored in this one, and I think that the games that UCLA is favored in are the most important games. But obviously there's a couple more games that I do want to talk about later on in these rankings. But I think Maryland is perfect where they're at number 9, because you're going to be favored, so that kind of lessens the importance, but also being favored means it's more important, and it's a conference game, and it comes in the middle of this high-end Big Ten schedule where you have Penn State and then Michigan State and then Maryland, and then now you move on to the toughest part of the schedule where you have Indiana, Nebraska, Ohio State, Washington, USC to close out the season. So Maryland is going to be one of those games where if you lose it, then you're probably kicking yourself in the feet at the end of the season when you only have 5 or 6 wins. So Maryland is going to be one of those games where you want to win. Also, on the other hand, I hate to speak so negatively, but like on a positive note, if you do start non-conference play 3-0, and then if you do beat Northwestern 4-0, and then you lose to Penn State, and then you're going up against Michigan State and Maryland 4-1 to start the season. Those 2 games are pretty important. You could start the season 6-1 and then have, games against conference opponents ahead of you where you're just 1 win away from 7 or 8 wins. So, yeah, that's going to be it for number 9. I think tomorrow's episode we'll go ahead and do a recap now that UCLA is done with fall camp in Costa Mesa. Now that they're done with Costa Mesa, we'll go ahead and do a kind of a recap and notes from the camp and everything that we've learned. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to the UCLA Bruins Insider Podcast. We'll see you tomorrow.